to every element ever. Baby Sagan here. We're going to begin our discussion with number 1, hydrogen. You guys know it, you love it, it's everywhere, it's all around us at all times. We got hydrogen, element number 1 on the periodic table. Now hydrogen here, like any element, has protons, neutrons, and electrons, which is kind of cool. We'll talk about that. We'll dive more into that crispy detail a little later. But what you need to know about hydrogen, it has 1 proton and 1 electron in its base form. So basically, kind of sort of looks like this. You got your proton at the positive charge, you got your electrons swinging around here, negative charge. So you got your proton, you got your electron going around, doing its thing, and you got the proton here. So it kind of sort of looks like that. This is more based on the Bohr model, which we know now is kind of, it doesn't quite look like this, but this gives us a basic idea. So this is base hydrogen right here. As you can see, it is 75% of all matter in the known universe. Absolutely insane. Hydrogen is everywhere. It's, you can't miss it. You just can't miss it. Pretty crazy. Also, it's described as having these kind of flavors. It is colorless, tasteless, odorless, and highly combustible, just like me. So, how about that? It basically, you wouldn't even know it exists. It's hard to believe we even know it exists. That's how crazy our science has become, that we can know an element as base as this, slap on the base as this. The fact that we even know something like this exists is pretty crazy. The fact that it is so hard to decipher and to discover. Think of it almost like the wind or something. Like it's there, but we can't really exactly see it precisely. Pretty crazy. Okay, so as you can see, it's 75% of all matter. So what would that fill in here? Any guesses over there in the classroom or at home? That is correct. It is the most abundant element in the universe, almost as abundant as human ignorance, as I'd like to say. So I like to have some fun with that. So there we go. Okay, onward back to our discussion with hydrogen. So some fun background about hydrogen. It was actually discovered in a lab in 1766 by a Henry, that's right, Mr. Fancy Pants Cavendish. Mr. Henry Cavendish was doing some experiments in his lab with like hydrochloric acid and some other stuff, which he probably shouldn't have been messing with. But he was a scientist, and we gotta do our experiments, we gotta discover stuff. So he was messing around in the lab, and he discovered that this weird substance, something happened in his lab. He noticed that when he was messing with a certain gas, it would always produce water. At the end, it would always produce this water, but it was also highly flammable. It would cause a lot of sparks. And it would produce this mysterious gas. And he was passing gas, not exactly. But he was passing this gas, and he didn't know what it was. But a lot of times, there would be water left over. Whenever he was working with this material, he always noticed that with the materials that he was working with, the hydrochloric acid and another material he was working with, he noticed that it always formed water while he's trying to pass this gas. It always formed water though. And so that was an interesting note that he took, and that he probably made the first initial discovery of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. So that was our boy Cavendish. Well, initially he thought, many scientists for many centuries, this theory called the phlogiston theory. Phlogiston, totally real. This thing called phlogiston was a thing that scientists thought was real. They thought this is what causes something to be flammable in the air, that when something sparks, that is actually this material called phlogiston. Totally bunk, doesn't make any sense, not true. We now know there's a variety of elements and other atoms that actually cause things to spark and are inflammable. One of them being hydrogen, so hey, there you go. Remember, as it says tasteless, odorless, it's also flammable, so hey, how about that? Anyway, so they thought it might be this thing called phlogiston, because they had this old theory like, oh yeah, that's just phlogiston or whatever. It's like, no, it's not. Well, our boy, some years later, our boy, Mr. Fancy Pants French guy, Antoine Lavoisier comes online. He's like, oh, it's 1783, I got you here. I'm going to name this substance. So he comes along and says, I'm going to name this really cool because it always forms water. So he did experiments with it too. He had taken all the data, all the research, and noticed that all this stuff's creating water as well. This I'm going to call water creator or water former, which in, I believe Latin, don't quote me on this, hydrogen, water generator, water creator, something like that. So that's where hydrogen comes from. That's the actual name. So Lavoisier here with the fancy French name comes up with the fancy science name for hydrogen. Ain't that something? That's pretty amazing. Pretty cool. So I always like to say, even though Cavendish gets a lot of credit for actually discovering hydrogen, I like to say Lavoisier is actually the one that names it, so I consider them kind of co-discoverers of hydrogen, even though many scientists go to our boy Cavendish, but, you know, what are you gonna do? Or Henry Petri dish, as I like to call him, but anyway, so fun topic there. That's a little bit about its history of its discovery. Moving on to some isotopes of hydrogen. So as we talked about hydrogen, in its base form, it is a diatomic molecule, but we won't talk about that. But in its base form, it has one proton and one electron. That would be protium. That would be isotope number 1. Isotope number 2 would be deuterium. That's one proton, one electron, and one neutron for you boys and girls out there. And we got tritium, which is one proton, one electron, 2 neutrons. So it gets heavier and heavier. Neutron just basically adds atomic weight or atomic mass to the elements. In this case, deuterium is an extra neutron, and tritium is jacks on another neutron. So, oh, here you go. Take another one. And this adds weight to it. And these are often used in nuclear power plants and with nuclear fission and fusion. The heavy hydrogen. So that's what those are called. So pretty interesting factoid on that. Those are different isotopes of hydrogen. One final point on our boy hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. What does that mean? It's flammable. It's everywhere. It fuels stars, baby. It is the reason that we are here. It is the reason that the sun is burning bright. It is the fuel of stars. Nuclear fusion. Hydrogen is the key for all nuclear fusion in the universe. It is the fuel of stars. Hydrogen becomes helium. If you don't know anything, just remember that, boys and girls. Hydrogen becoming helium. Basically pushing past the electromagnetic force and it smashes together, becoming helium, releases a ton of energy, heat and light. Amazing stuff. That's hydrogen. Without it, we would not have nuclear fusion. We would not have nuclear fission. And we would not have a potential clean energy future because of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. And that is all for today. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment, hit that sub sandwich button. You know it's good for you. Thank you. And listen to your teachers and listen to the stars. Have a good one.